Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, guys. Today we will continue our next sessions for the HSC training, and this session is regarding to very critical operational activity, which most of the time the employees who are working in an organization or at any workplace comes in contact with it. What is this? This is heavy lifting. Sometimes it is called as crane operation lifting and other lifting using some other lifting devices. But today we will discuss about the crane operation. First of all, you need to go through this thing that what is a lifting. Lifting is an activity in which you involve any equipment to lift it from one place and to spot it at another place. This is a lifting. Moving it from one place to another place is lifted. In the lifted condition, this is called the lifting. So there are many lifting devices which are used in the workplaces: crane, forklift, and winches, and chain blocks. All of these type of things, or pellets, all of these type of things are involved in the lifting, because some equipments and tools can be lifted by man force, but for heavy lifting we need some devices, mechanical devices, to lift the equipment, as it cannot be easily lifted up by the personnel on the or by the man force. So it requires a mechanical lifting which needs equipments to be lifted. So while going towards the lifting, we will first of all know about the equipments which are used in lifting. As I've told you earlier, there are chain blocks, there are mechanical jacks. Simply take an example of a jack for lifting a car which is inside your vehicle. This is a lifting device, because you cannot lift a car by your force. You require another mechanical device, a hydraulic lifting device or a mechanical lifting device. This is your jack inside your car. Other are chain blocks, air winches, which are used for lifting of heavy equipments. Forklift, which is used most of the times in the organizations, in the small stores, in the warehouses, to lift an equipment from one place to another and shift it to another place, or to stack it properly. Other are cranes. Sometimes the cranes are the crawling cranes, sometimes the cranes are mobile cranes. So these cranes, some are cantilever stationary cranes, some are called tower cranes. They are used for lifting operations. When we go towards the hazards which are involved in the lifting, we will talk about the things which are very important. For the lifting devices, because you have to lift an important equipment, so you need to make it sure that the equipment with which we are lifting and the personnel who are involved in lifting, they must be properly certified. Certified from where? They should be certified from a third party, because third parties are already being certified by the main certifying companies. So they have a authorization to check your equipment, to inspect it using the load, and to make it sure that it can lift the specific weight or the load, and then they make it certified. Sometimes the certification requires for the lifting devices. What are the lifting devices? Your shackles, your lifting slings. Then comes for the lifting certification of the crane. Then comes the lifting certification for the rigger or the crane operator. These 4 or 5 persons or the equipments are very important in lifting, and they need a third party certifications, because sometimes the equipments are not used for a long time. Lifting devices are not used for a long time. Sometimes when they are used for a long time, or they don't have any proper maintenance, they can result into the failure of the equipment to be lifted. They can lead to the failure of the mechanical machine which is required to lift an equipment, and it can cause equipment damage, it can cause a human injury. What are the major causes which are or the accidents of the crane accidents. What is this? Operator errors and mechanical failure. What is an operator error? Your operator who is lifting the equipment is not properly certified for lifting heavy equipments or using a heavy lift device. There is a chances that you overload the crane with the equipment. For example, if equipment is of weight 30 tons and you are using a crane of 15 tons against to lift it, it will result in the fall of the equipment. It will result in the overturning of the crane, and it will lead to the accident. It will lead to the human injury. It will lead to the damage to the equipment. Mechanical failure. Your machine is not certified to lift a specific equipment. So these are the causes of the accidents in the crane operations. When you are talking about the incidents, how they occur, when you are doing any job, you need to make it show, you need to proper do a risk assessment for that area for safer operation. What is the risk assessment in this case? As I've told you before, that you need a third-party certification of the crane operator, the lifting devices, the lifting equipment, lifting machine, sorry, not equipment, lifting machine, and the personnel who are involved, they must have the proper certifications. Second thing is that you have to check the ground stability on which the crane or any other lifting device, lifting machine is to stand upon to work. And there is the training. You need to make sure that all the persons have the proper training for the lifting operations, and you have to check also for the maintenance of the lifting machine. So these things, if neglected, it will lead to an accident. Unstable ground. If you talk about the unstable ground, what is type of unstable ground? That the ground is not proper, is not smooth, the ground is not proper compacted, there is a rainy weather and the soil becomes too muddy, and it changes to marsh condition, marsh situation, and you try to avoid to place the pads underneath the outriggers of the crane. This will lead to the dump of the outriggers into the ground if the soil is not compact. Overload. What you do? Your object to be lifted is standing in one position, and you have parked the vehicle, lifting machine, a far away place from there, and you do not know from where to lift. When you lift it, whole of the force is on the one end of the equipment to be lifted. When the crane exerts the force, this part of the crane, when extends, the distance becomes greater. Here the force or the load becomes very weak. Here the load becomes more. So what it does, you are lifting the equipment, trying to lift it this position from here, from this position, from the back of the lifting machine, considering the example of a crane. So it will leave the ground surface, and it will overturn because you have placed the equipment far away from the lifting machine. This leads to the overturning of the crane, because when you extend the booms of the crane, its lifting capacity is decreasing if the object is far away from it. Lack of training. Sometimes the people are not properly trained for performing a lifting operation, and this is the major cause of the accident at that time. He don't know how to give the signal to the crane operator. The riggers don't know. The persons who are working in the crane operation, they also don't know how to avoid the blind spots. Is the blind spot lifting is allowed in the crane operation? The crane operator cannot. What is a blind spot? A crane operator cannot see the object which he is trying to lift, and it is far away from his eyes, and you try to lift this object using your hand signals. This is not a good idea. Blind spot lifting is avoided in the crane operations, because if you don't have any proper eye contact with the equipment to be lifted, you cannot lift the equipment properly, and it will lead to the accident. When you are lifting the operation, as I told you, you have to perform a proper risk assessment. In this risk assessment, The outer risk assessment, I have told you about the ground surface, about the areas to be lifted, sling shackles, crane operator certifications, all of these being checked. Then you have to come towards the object to be lifted. 4 or 5 things are considered in this lifting operation. One is the load of the equipment to be lifted, geometry of the equipment to be lifted, task, what is to be lifted, environment, is there is a rainy weather, is it the rainy environment over there, if the speed is blowing very fast for normal operations. When you're talking about the wind speed, 15 meter per second or 25 kilometers per hour, the speed, if this speed is calculated by a device which is called an anemometer, if it is calculated and this speed is 25 kilometers or 15 meter per second, then you do not need to do a crane operation. Because what happens when you lift the object and leaving the ground surface, the gravitational pull is increasing. As per our law, the gravitational pull on the object is increasing and you have a strong wind blowing, so you cannot control the weight. It is swinging like in this way, in this way, in this way, forward and backward, forward and backward. And if your area of the equipment to be lifted is more, then the wind is giving a resistance to the object, and this object tries to move here and there, and the load on the crane boom exceeding from the weight which is showing by the speed weight detectors or the limit torque switch devices inside, or the safety limit switch devices in the crane, is much more than what is actually over there at that scenario with the specific speed which I have told you. Then we go towards and one very important thing which is important in the crane operations, that when you are doing a crane operation, you need to make it sure that there are no overhead electrical power lines. Because when you make the boom up and your boom comes in contact with the zero potential of these high electric power lines, all of the transmission from, because you are at the ground potential and the surface is at the, and the overhead electrical power lines are at the height potential, so all of the magnetic electrical current will comes inside the crane and you can get a catastrophic accident. So you need to make it sure that there is no overhead electrical power lines to come in contact with the crane booms. During the crane operations, there are some precautionary measures which you need to make it sure. Check the surface of the ground, it should be properly compacted. When the object to be lifted, you need to make it sure that you have the tag lines, the ropes, to tie it in the diagonal position of the load, to make it sure that the persons who are working with the equipment, who are moving the equipment in the lifted position, are far away from the, if something happens with the sling shackles or they're broken by chance, the object will fall, so they will not come under the object. So need to make it sure that the persons, there is no any other person under the object. There are tag lines used and you have to need to properly barricade the area to prohibit the entry of unauthorized personnel. The riggers should be properly good in the hand signals. You need to know this is the up position, this is the down position, this is need to extend your boom, this is need to close the boom, this is need to lower up, this is need to lower down slowly in the slowly position, this is need to stop. This type of things you need to make it sure that all of your riggers know to give a proper signal to the crane operator. While assessing the weight to be lifted and the height of the object to be lifted, you need to make it sure that you have a proper load radius chart which is provided by the manufacturer of the crane, that this crane at this angle, at this radius, with this weight can lift this equipment. Otherwise, if you do a wrong assessment, you can result in a fatality, you can result in a damage to the equipment or the machine which is lifting the device or the equipment you try to lift it. So this is all about the crane operation. This is a brief introduction about the crane operation safety, but the most of the hazards which are defined and the preventive measures which are defined are the same which are implemented in the workplace for lifting of the equipment. Then we will later on discuss about the forklift operations, lifting with the chain blocks, lifting with the air winches, because the terms and conditions will change when you are using the other types of the lifting devices. Thank you all, guys. I hope so the information is very good for you and it will be implemented and it is helpful to you in your workplace. Thank you.